Happy Friday and welcome back. So, my day is actually just starting. It is, I think it's after 12 o'clock. I decided to take today off to rejuvenate, to reflect, for self care. Self care is of utmost importance. So, I mindfully take self care days from time to time. I wanted to talk about why I decided to move to New York City. And I moved to New York back in 2014. And I swear, it seems like yesterday when I first moved to New York City. Granted, I moved to New York from Atlanta, Georgia. I actually was getting out of a relationship. I made the decision to kind of step away from this relationship that I was in. I felt like the relationship was dead end. It was with my best friend at the time. We had some significant history together as friends, as struggle partners. And I felt like I had outgrown not only Atlanta, Georgia, but also that relationship. And I just wanted to challenge myself to just step outside of my comfort zone. And I made the decision to move to New York. Now, I had visited New York with my family, I think back when I was in high school. Finishing up my senior year, we had a family reunion here because I have family here, New York, New Jersey. So we came to visit for a family reunion. But I hadn't really had the chance to explore New York, how some people before they make that jump and make the decision to settle down in a new state or a new city, they usually go and scope out the place, like do some research. I didn't really immerse myself in New York in that way. It really was a blind move when I came here in 2014, like literally. I did have a plan though. So the plan at the time was for me to complete my master's degree, which I had started back in Florida, post bachelor's. And I knew that I wanted to do that. I knew that I was definitely going to accomplish that and complete my master's degree. But when I got here, I felt like everything just fell into place. Like, it's something to be said about that. When you move to a place, right? When you are stepping out of your comfort zone, stepping out literally on faith, like you don't know how things are going to go, right? You have no idea. And I was moving here with very little resources at the time, but I stepped out on faith that I knew that things would somehow work out as they always do. And it did. Like, and when I say literally, everything fell right into place for me when I moved to New York in 2014. I first found a place in Lower Manhattan. It was in the Chelsea neighborhood. I stayed there very briefly, maybe around a month. And then I found an apartment in Washington Heights, which is like I think it's like beyond Upper West Side, in Manhattan. And I moved to Washington Heights. It was a nice neighborhood, quiet, still Manhattan, still busy, right? But I felt safe in that neighborhood. It was predominantly Dominican. Um, and I lived there for a little longer than I lived in Chelsea. And I fell in love, That's what happened. I fell in love like not too long after I moved to New York. So I moved here. I know it was the summer of New York in 2014. I can't pinpoint the exact month. Perhaps it was like June, July. But I met this guy in October around Halloween. I can't forget that. And I fell in love. And then it was just like, wow. um we that relationship progressed very rapidly, very quickly. We moved in like damn near from day one. We moved in together. He had a place in the Bronx, and Little Italy in the Bronx. I moved in with him. We hit it off like very quickly, and that relationship really, I don't know. I really, because this video really is not about that relationship, but I will have to say that relationship obviously was a very significant time in my life. Like that period alone, which I dated him for 3 years, was very significant because for many different reasons. So I went through a lot in that relationship. So much to the extent where I was moved, like deeply within my soul, within my spirit, that like, I need to get away from this relationship. This shit is toxic as hell, right? It is not to pinpoint, fingers at any particular person, but the relationship definitely was, not serving me well, right? Psychologically, emotionally, physically, financially, spiritually, So I had made the decision to definitely get very far away from that person. I was looking into moving to the UK, and I was so serious about it because I know I always wanted to pursue my doctoral studies, my PhD in clinical psychology. So I actually was looking into programs out in the UK. Around the London area, I was going to these international grad school fairs that had come to New York at the time, and I, was scoping out a few. I had a few prospects in mind of university I was going to apply to. I actually was in conversation with a few. But then something kind of also got my attention with LA at the time. And LA obviously is on the other side of this country, right, on the West Coast. And, I was attracted to LA for a few reasons. One was a doctoral program that I was interested in PhD in clinical psychology. And the second was another program separate from psychology. It was focused on filmmaking. And you guys know, I'm an artiste. I consider myself a multifaceted artiste, right? In terms of, my interests, my talents, my skill set. I'm a writer. I definitely have a vision for creating stories. So that's something I've always wanted to do, like bring my own personal story to life, and also just giving, a platform for other people to bring their stories to life too as well. That's something I've been doing for a while. You guys can go check out my business page at Ubawa, spelled UBAWA, .org. So I definitely was very attracted to what LA had to offer. I didn't quite want to leave New York City permanently, though. Like, I always had in mind that, I'm coming back because this city, this place has so much to offer. A lot of people describe it as a melting pot of opportunity, a melting pot of many different ethnic backgrounds and ethnicities and cultures and languages and foods, and it's just perfect, for a person who appreciates diversity, and is open to interacting and mingling with people from, different parts of the world. This is the perfect place. And I knew that in the back of my mind, I always wanted to come back to New York. So when I left New York, I left majority of my things here in storage. And I stepped out on faith and decided to go to Los Angeles as opposed to the UK instead. Could you imagine how things would be much different for me had I moved to London? I probably would have picked up their accent. Probably not. I don't know. I'm a Southern belle. You guys can hear my Southern accent. It comes out from time to time. But I decided to go with Los Angeles, and I moved out to LA blindly. Like, that's the thing about me. For me, and I appreciate sometimes the fact that I am childless, right? I don't have any children tagging along with me. So if I want to pick up and just move somewhere, any part of the world, I have that luxury and affordability to do that. Nothing can stop me, I've always had that kind of perspective. I was born and raised in Jacksonville, Florida, so Atlanta is not my home necessarily. New York is not my native born home, though I've made it my home now. So I've done that, just picked up and moved, and I made that decision to leave New York, actually to leave the relationship that I was in, which apparently seems like a pattern, like I'm leaving relationships, but that's the thing. And I don't actually feel bad about it. Some women, I think their whole life is like centered around a man, and there's nothing wrong with it. Don't get me wrong. I love my brothers. I'm all about Black unity, right? And building family. However, I think it's of importance to mention that if a woman is going to center her life around a man, a male partner, it should be reciprocal, right? Like he, at the same time, should reverence her to that same regard, put her on that same pedestal. And a lot of times it's not reciprocated, right? You have women that put their whole lives on pause to serve a man, to serve the wishes, desires, and needs of a man. And it's just like, how are your needs being reciprocated, being fulfilled? I am definitely not that woman. Like it's a mutual exchange here for me. I could have it no other way. And I think I look back at my life and the things that I have accomplished. Like I've accomplished more being alone without a man than I've ever accomplished being alongside one. It's unfortunate, one can look at that in many different aspects, but definitely, for me, if something is not serving me, I'm out. I don't care if it's a partner, a man, a friendship, a job, especially a freaking 9 to 5, I feel like, no, if anything, some things that we deem as, like we look at the thing as if we can't live without. It's something that oftentimes we really need to let go. That's just the truth of the matter. And for me, I've never had a problem letting go, right? Because I put myself first above anything else. You have to. And so there is a pattern that you guys can see of me letting go things that don't serve me, right? Whether it was that relationship back in Atlanta, whether it was, the relationship that I had made with a guy here in New York. Though unfortunately, it's like he followed me. Like he was very persistent. So he did follow me out to Los Angeles. And he had his mind set to try to make things work. Like he was so gung-ho about, trying to pull things together. And I did give him another chance. I wouldn't even say a second chance, another chance to make things work. And we end up, being together in Los Angeles. Let me talk about my experiences in Los Angeles apart from that relationship. Granted, obviously that relationship did not work. I ended up, having to really put my foot down and sever ties with that person because, no, it's just not serving me, right? If it's negatively impacting my health, my emotional well-being, my happiness, no, you got to go, right? I find it interesting that one of my patients at the hospital where I work, she's at this turning point in her life, and she asked me this very life-changing question, which I tell her, it's so very poignant. She says, how do I let go? And I have the answer readily available. I'm like, listen, for me, letting go is not really a problem for me, right? If it's something that you see is negatively impacting your life, that's the thing. You see that this thing is detrimental to your happiness, your survival, you thriving in the world. I say it has to go. That's just my philosophy. And I stand by that wholeheartedly. It has to go. Right? You're not going to hold me back. I don't care what it is, who it is. You got to go. Okay? I don't care. I could be very much attached to that thing. Right? And I think, of course, not to undermine, right, the challenges, because obviously there would be a challenge to letting go of something that you have developed this emotional attachment to. whether it is a problematic behavior, whether, it's a bad habit, an addiction, or whatever it is, sometimes it's hard to let go, whether it's unforgiveness of some person who did something very harmful to you, but I think it comes easier with time and with practice too, obviously, as most things. For me, I think you have to love yourself first and foremost, though, because if you don't have that love, that genuine love for yourself, you don't see value when you look at yourself in the mirror, right? When you just sit quietly alone with yourself, when there's only you, and you think, if you don't value yourself, you're going to take all kinds of shit. You're going to carry all kinds of baggage. You're going to allow all these different kind of things to negatively impact you because you have not internalized and really made true and manifest this value of a person of who you truly are. So that does take work, though, because unfortunately, a lot of people have been through some shit. Other people have told them and treated them in such ways that has made them feel less than of a person. Has undermined their worth, their importance. So they've internalized these negative perspectives of who they are that is not really true, and then you are walking around with this low self-esteem, this negative image of yourself. That's what you're going to attract. On top of that, you're going to hold on to things that no longer serve you. For me, no, that shit got to go, for real. I have zero tolerance for nonsense in that department. So yes, I think that is important. You have to let go. Be willing to let go. So my experience in living in Los Angeles, I remember when I first landed in LA. I actually landed in Burbank, at Burbank Airport. It was at nighttime. It wasn't too late, though. I think it was maybe like 9 o'clock at night. It was getting late, though. And I had no idea what the hell I would like. I had no idea. Like, where am I? What am I going to do? Because granted, think about this. Like, I left in the context of getting away from a very toxic, damn near life-threatening situation that I was in. And I just wanted to get away from that. And I always had this belief that, I will make a way because I know the strength that I have within me, right? I feel like I can go anywhere and make a way. That's just me, all right? And I've done that. I've put this belief to practice, and I've stepped out on faith and went and have made a way. I will make a way. So that's what I had in mind. And granted, I only had probably $40 in my possession. That's all the money I had in my bank account. But I went knowing that things will come together, that the universe will take care of me. Like, that's just my true, long-standing faith, belief that I have, right? And it did. It worked out. I remember, getting off the plane and going through the airport, very small airport, and I made my way to the bus station that literally was like across the parking lot, right, of this airport. I go to the bus stop. Well, it wasn't even a bus station. It was like a bus stop, right? Across the parking lot in this airport, and I sit and wait, for a bus to come, and it came, and I'm talking with the driver, and I'm like, I had no idea where the bus was going, but I found out that it was going to Hollywood, California, and I asked him, do you know anywhere I can stay? Like, is this bus going to go anywhere on the path where I can have a place to stay? And I just feel like that's how the universe works, and sometimes that's a good place to be in. Not that maybe you would deliberately put yourself in a situation like that, but it just goes to show that you are taken care of, right? Like, there's a scripture in the Bible, though I don't identify with myself as a Christian, but there are some very, I think, true scriptures in the Bible that speak on many different things, that we could live by. And there's a scripture that says that, if he takes care of the bees or the birds, or, like, they don't have to worry about how they're going to get food. Like, why are we concerned about where we're going to lay our head or where we're going to get food, right? Like, if he can take care of the animals, the birds that are flying, they don't have to worry about that. Why are we concerned? So that has never been a concern of mine. I navigate and move through the world in that way. And I've always been good. I'm good. Never had to worry about that, right? So I knew that I trusted that the universe would definitely guide me in a way that I would be okay. And it did. And the bus driver told me, we end up going to Hollywood Boulevard. And alongside Hollywood Boulevard, there are hostels, right? Which is basically like cheap hotels that you can rent, rooms that you can rent for very cheap, a night. And, he pointed those out to me, and I was like, thank you. And he was like, good luck to you. Have a good night. I got off the bus. I ended up getting a room. This was so like on the fly. You talking about spontaneous and stepping out on faith. And that's what happened. And then like the rest is history, Obviously all this is part of my autobiography that I will definitely go in more detail because it's obviously more to the story than that. But that's like the start of my new life in Los Angeles. And then I remember just how starkly different it was from New York in a disappointing way, right? Because New York, I remember moving to New York in 2014 and really being happy with it because there's so many people. I felt like I could be kind of inconspicuous, and just be without anyone knowing who I was. Not really having much attention. There are times when you just don't want attention necessarily. You just want to be, right? Whereas in Los Angeles, like I felt like I stood out in ways that I didn't want to stand out. And I'm like, I remember I ended up getting an apartment in Hollywood, California, like literally footsteps away from the Hollywood Walk of Fame. And I'm like walking down Hollywood Boulevard, and I'm like, yo, where is everyone? And I moved to LA in 2016 after I had graduated with my master's from Long Island University. And I remember, I'm like, yo, where is everybody? This shit is empty as hell. It seemed like a ghost town compared to what I had come from in New York, where we're talking about people all around you when you're walking down the street, right? And I remember just the interactions I had with people there. It felt weird. It felt like, yo, wait, is this person up to something? Why are they being too nice? They're being like a little bit too happy. They're too happy, number one. They're too nice. I would have people like I'm on the train and people were like, oh, just spark up a conversation with me. Oh, what are you doing tonight? Who the fuck are you? Right? Like, this is night and day. And I get that, LA is, I had to see that. It's a culture shock to see how LA is just diametrically different than New York in every aspect, in every way, every sense of the word. It's like the food is different, the people are different, the culture is different, the scenery is, everything is just so different, And when you think of that kind of interaction, like that, something like that happening, not that it can't happen in New York, but it's kind of less likely. Like I've met people, and people I would say are friendly. Don't get me wrong. It's not to paint, New York as this place where everyone is just mean and people don't socialize. It's not true. There's different ways of socializing, I think. But yeah, just like, oh, what are you doing tonight? I'm just like, what? Just thought it was weird. And, I come to realize that LA, it has what it has to offer. But in terms of, will I move back there? And that's the question here in this video, because I have a colleague that it's funny. She recently kind of sparked my interest in returning to Los Angeles, because we're talking about, our jobs and our pay, right? And granted, I get paid pretty decent where I work. I work for New York State. She works in the federal system. She works in the federal system, in Los Angeles. And I've been comparing like pay scales to see, okay, who pays more, right? And historically, actually, the federal paid more than the state for psychologists. But it seems like, I know in New York State psychologists make a little bit more than working for the federal government here in New York, right? And she works for the federal government, and she's, trying to convince me, right? And the way she posed it, right, the way she presented it, and it was like, right? I had to kind of think for a second, like, And I told her, okay, you send me the information, right? But then I'm thinking, like, there's a reason why I moved back to New York after I completed my doctoral studies in 2020. I moved back here. I always had plans to move back because LA it just ain't hitting for me, And I've had some fun experiences. Like, I do like certain aspects of the entertainment scene. Obviously, I like the red carpet events. I like the film industry. Like, I like all of that stuff when it comes to, the advanced film screenings that I would be invited to, and being able to meet and interact with the celebrities. Like, I've come in contact with so many A-list celebrities, and that's cool, right? Obviously, there's a dark side to Hollywood that oftentimes people don't talk about. I've encountered that dark side. But yeah, LA, I mean, just you look at LA, the composition, the demographic, racial, ethnic demographic composition of Los Angeles compared to other major cities, especially New York, it ain't hitting. I think LA is like 11 to 12% black. Okay. Crossover back to New York. We're talking about a third of New York residents are black, I think. Yeah, it's definitely a higher percentage. And even higher than that, I think, in Brooklyn, in certain parts of New York, And that's just black, not to mention other ethnic groups that have really good ties with black people here, in New York. I feel like because, New York is so diverse and it has a higher density of black people here, it just makes it feel more culturally inclusive because, people from other races that live here, that work here, that own businesses here, they just have more exposure to black people because there are more black people here. That's a fact. Whereas in LA, it's just like, okay, black people are there, but they're such a significant minority to the extent where, that reflects upon their position in society, the power and how they're treated by other races. And for me, obviously being a proud Pan-African, it ain't no way I'm going to tolerate disrespect from anyone, but especially from white people. It rubs me the wrong way. And I think because there's a culture of white supremacy there, though Latinos are the dominant race in Los Angeles, it's just like many of them identify themselves as white. And sometimes phenotypically, you can't even tell the difference between them and white people until they start speaking and you hear the accent. Some of them have lost their accent too, though. But it's just like, nah. The food is awful in Los Angeles. There are places, the food is okay. And I create a whole album of taste testing restaurants I've taste tested in Los Angeles on my Facebook page. There are a few, there are a handful there, but like I like a few of the Brazilian restaurants there in Los Angeles. But you can't even compare. I think LA to New York when it comes to many different facets, right? You just the opportunities that are available in terms of being able to excel of that socioeconomic ladder is here. Granted, I obviously had the opportunity to complete my doctoral studies there, but that experience in of itself, that's a whole freaking book of the shit I had to go through, which I had begun to vlog about those experiences, on my Facebook and YouTube channel. But then I think I felt it was better for me to kind of lay low. And I actually stopped vlogging about that. Though I would still talk about certain things, but I wouldn't blatantly title it, that whole series that I created strategically, right? It had more political reasons because I saw what was happening. I saw what was happening. It's like the more I outed, the truth and what was going on in LA in the context of my doctoral studies, the more hell I went through. It's like the more pushback I got. And I'm just like, okay, I see how I have to move here. And I probably would not have completed, when I say, and I'll say this, I'm not going to say too much because I feel like some things you just are reserved for a certain place and a certain time, right, and format, and I'm definitely not going to go into too much detail. I can talk about what I felt, though, like my experiences and how it made me feel going through that doctoral program, living in Los Angeles, and being around even some Black people, even in my program, that I'm like, it was so repulsive. It just disgusts me to see how, how can y'all, I get that, yes, you want to be successful, right? And you want to excel, but at the same time, like, I'm not kissing nobody ass. And I've always been very vocal and an outspoken, I understand there's a certain time and place to speak your mind, but I feel like sometimes when people get in that mode, like, okay, I'm just going to be quiet. It's better just to, not say. No, you have to speak up. And I would speak up. Fuck that. I'm speaking up in all of my classes, right? Sometimes being the only Black person in the class. This is a predominantly white freaking institution that I went to. I'm going to speak up and speak my mind, whether you like it or not, whether it's offensive or not. I got in lots of trouble, okay? I ain't even about to sit up here and go into that here, but know that, I got into lots of trouble where I had to go to a lot of meetings. All this shit is documented. I barely fucking made it out of my doctoral program because they saw that resistance in me. They saw that, okay, yeah, she's a troublemaker kind of thing, right? I'm like, I'm not a troublemaker. It's just like, y'all used to Black people coming through, and maybe they're not even used to Black people. That's the problem. They're not even used to us, coming through, but they expect Black people to just be, yes, sir, yes, master, and granted, LA is still like the South. When you think about it, I felt very much like I'm living in the South, and I moved away from fucking Florida, from the South, for a reason. That's why I moved to Atlanta. I lived in Atlanta for 3 years, because I feel like, okay, Atlanta's a Black Mecca, maybe have it a little bit easier. And it was cool there. They had some opportunities. I got a chance to, work within the entertainment industry and see what that was like. Met Tyler Perry, worked at his studio. So I've had some great experiences in Atlanta too as well, but I had to get the fuck away from Florida. Let's make that clear, okay? And people look at Florida as, oh, that's Disneyland, that's Universal Studios, it's, the tourists. Nah, some bullshit. Being Black down there, nah. And I don't think much has changed either. But I definitely had to get away from that racist shit. But I can tell you this, what I felt living in Los Angeles, it felt very much like my experience living in Florida. And I had got to the point where I said to myself, I said, I can see why people commit terrorist acts. It got to that point. I can see why, I can see why. And it's just like it's reasons why people, are on the side of destroying this system that has been created and obviously marginalizes and, keeps out certain groups of people. This system is not designed for us, right? And if you care about yourself, you care about your survival, you care about the survival of those who will come after you, then you have to fight for that, Not that you want to, but you have to speak up and say something and do something about that. Point blank, and hold people accountable for that, And so that's where I was at in Los Angeles. I felt like it was too much of me having to fight directly the people that I was interacting with, right? And this is in the context of a professional program that claims to be culturally, sensitive and culturally inclusive. Like they have this on their advertisement. They're promoting such thing as all institutions do, right? It's like the catchphrase. It's a thing to say. We're diverse and we don't discriminate and all this bullshit with the EOC, knowing damn fucking well they don't like us. It comes off clear, and it's just like I call them out on it. And I felt that it was too much of that. Like I felt like, God damn, I just want to live and to be able to focus on the things that drive me and my passion. I felt like that was more of a distraction, because when you're constantly doing that, fighting the system in so many different ways, it's hard to really focus. And that's, I think, obviously serves as a double point and purpose for them. Not only do they want to destroy us, but there are many different ways that they do destroy us, right? And causing these distractions, it takes away from the thing that your attention that you can have diverted on things that could bring you further, propel you and your community further. And I just felt like, nah. So I think to that point, I clearly see why I decided to leave LA where it was and move my ass back here. And I get it, for LA, a lot of people move there, even Black people, obviously, because they have aspirations to, be a part of the entertainment industry. But it's like, at what cost? I didn't move there to be a part of the fucking entertainment industry per se. I moved there obviously to pursue my doctoral studies. I had expressed interest in a program there that I did complete. And, I had interest in learning how to, bring my vision to life from professionals who obviously have done it. So I was enrolled in a filmmaking school there in Los Angeles. But even that shit was so radio. I went through so much bullshit. I'm just like, how do y'all? And it's a reason why LA is very whitewashed. There's a reason why a lot of us ain't living out there. When you look at the proportion of Black people in America and see where the hell they ass live, it's not fucking the West Coast. There are Black people that live out there, but we are predominantly here on the East Coast. Okay, so the reason why we've had that establishment, we've settled here, and this is where our grounding is. This is where our foothold is, right? And even still, not to say we have it so easy on this side, but white people and other races are kind of used to us being here, right? Whereas there, it's just like looking at you like. Like we don't belong, or, fuck all of that. And I'm looking at the way Black people interact, and they're just dying to fit in. Just pleading for validation and inclusion. And I feel like that's damaging to the psyche. At what cost? It's very damaging to the psyche. And we know, our experiences shape our biology from an epigenetic perspective. It shapes the expression of our genes, right, that we have. And then when we procreate, we pass those genes down to our children. want no freaking yes ma'am, yes sir children. Yes master children. Hell no. I'm not that way. And that's not a good way, I think, to raise children in this world. Hell no. So with my decision to move back to New York, like I felt very confident. Like I was so happy to move back. So happy and so, excited I think about it because this was in the middle of the pandemic actually. This was the brink of the pandemic. So the pandemic happened, we got word of it, the world essentially got word of the pandemic happening. I think it was March 2020. And I moved back to New York, April 1st. Kid you not, April 1st. I'm like, yeah, I got the fuck up out of LA. The first chance I got, I'm out, okay? When they told us that we could no longer return to our clinical practicum sites because we were deemed non-essential employees, which was a good thing, right? Some people took that as like, oh, a hit, like, oh, I'm not essential. Fuck that. I took advantage of that shit. Like, good, I don't have to return, right? And this obviously was part of my training in the program, but this was my last clinical rotation though, right? And that's when I was working at the prison. I was working for the California Department of Corrections at a prison there. And they said, hey, the pandemic happened, you don't have to return. Okay, yo. When I got news of that, I actually was in New York, completing the paperwork, the administrative stuff to get me set up for my pre-doc internship that was to start later that year, right? My 5th year pre-doc internship, I was actually here in New York doing my fingerprinting and all that paperwork. And then I got word that, okay, this thing happened with this fucking pandemic and things were going to be shut down. I will remember this shit like it was yesterday. And I'm just like, okay. And I had to make a decision. Like, what do I do? Do I stay my ass in Los Angeles and not knowing, it was the uncertainty for me, like not knowing where this thing was going to go, like how it was going to unfold, just not trusting. We are already distrusting of the government, okay? A lot of people, not just black people, we're just already distrusting of the government. So for this shit to happen, it's like, hold on, what they got this sleeve, Anybody have my black ass all the way out there in the West Coast? Hell, I already don't like these motherfuckers over here, right? I already feel a certain kind of way. So that was a no-brainer for me to go ahead and make that decision to pack up my shit and book my flight. And I brought my ass on back to New York, April 1st, 2020. And hey, the rest is history. And from that conversation, like I had my colleague recently, because she's trying to convince me to move back to LA. And I'm just like, why? Other than this idea that the federal government in Los Angeles could possibly pay more than what I'm making here in New York State. Not by much, though. She was like telling me what the pay grade was. But I'm just like, I don't think it's worth a couple $1,000 extra. It's not necessarily worth me packing all my shit up and moving back to LA, considering the little that LA has to offer me. New York has much more to offer, It's different. Not to say racism does not exist here in New York, but, racism is something you can feel. All right, it's gotten to that point where you can feel, like you can walk into a room and feel the racism, the level, the degree, the extent of the racism. It's an instinctual thing, right? I'm from the South, so I had no racism many miles away. It's like, you can smell that shit. You can see it kind of seeping through the pores of motherfuckers. You can feel it, right? And, I felt it obviously a lot more significant out in Los Angeles. I'm like, hell nah. I gotta get my ass on up out of here. Or I might end up on death row on some real shit. For real, yo. And I feel like, I said this before, like, that is my freaking greatest fear. Like, and I know they say the thing that we are afraid of, sometimes we end up experiencing, we end up manifesting. So I'm very mindful, like that's an internal struggle that I have, internal and external struggle that I have with myself. And, obviously with the system of what it is, as my ex-partner used to say, like, I ain't gonna call it a system of white supremacy. I'm gonna call it a system of what the fuck it is. because they ain't nothing supreme about the motherfuckers. But it's just that, yeah, like staying my ass free, in the physical sense, out of fucking prison. Um, but yeah, like New York, even like last night, I ended up going to this event at the Brick. Like I feel like I've been very much connected, and I'm still connected with a lot of different things in Los Angeles. To every place I've gone, I have been connected to things that interest me, doing fun activities and being involved in, obviously things that matter to me, especially within the entertainment industry. Um, so yeah, I feel like New York though, I've built a lot more connections here. I mean, a lot, just because it's just more. New York has more of everything here, clearly. So yeah, I went to this screening last night from this cohort at the Brick, where they learn like the different aspects of filmmaking, and they got a chance to showcase their films. I think it was like 12 filmmakers. It was 12 films, so short films. But it's just like one of the films was actually about New York, and I think a few of the films were actually, but yeah, it just reminded me like, yo, damn, New York is just so rich. People may say, okay, it's gritty, it's dirty, it's rat infested, it's this, is all these negative things, but at the same time, it's just as beautiful in that same vein too, the experiences I've had here, you can't take that away. Like, I've had many more positive experiences here by comparison to any other place that I've lived. And that's a fact. Just the people. Like, I live in Upper East Side, New York right now, and I am surrounded by rich and wealthy white people. Surprisingly, though, I feel very much respected where I am. Like, knock on wood, obviously, but I haven't had any issues, like, and it's with that, like, when you are in a place where it's just like things are going well, you are respected, people treat you as a human being, people even admire you. Like, I get compliments, not just here, obviously, where I live, but even other places I walk throughout the city, clearly because I'm beautiful, but from the inside out. But it's just like, it's hard. You develop this attachment to a place, and it's hard to leave. And even if I ask myself, like, do I want to move? Obviously, I live in an apartment here in Upper East Side. I love my exposed brick. It's a a full 1-bedroom apartment. Not no studio, right? Not no half-ass efficiency shit. It's a full 1-bedroom apartment. And I've gotten very much attached to it. And I asked myself, like, well, obviously there's other neighborhoods to live in New York. Obviously there's bigger places, right? It's always bigger. There's always better. Do I want to leave Upper East? It's so hard. Not even just leaving Upper East Side, but leaving this apartment. I know I'm going to leave. I know that's a fact, obviously. I'm not going to stay in this apartment forever because I'm not going to be a renter forever. But even that process of thinking through, like, just leaving this apartment is difficult for me because I've grown so attached to it and I just made it my home. And even the idea of leaving Upper East Side, just like, I don't think I want to leave. Where else? What neighborhood is better? It's just like, okay, if I leave, then what if I'm, like, very disappointed where I go? I could go into my ideal place where it's like a high rise with floor to ceiling windows, in my island kitchen. But what if it just doesn't give the feel of what I have here, and then I feel disappointed in that. So that's some things that I've been thinking about lately. But in terms of leaving New York, I don't see it, honestly. And even to leave New York to go to a place, let's say, outside of the U.S., because that's something I've been exploring. So I do want to travel to other places, and I think that's when my perspective is definitely going to open up a little bit more, because I have not left the U.S. necessarily. I mean, I went to Canada, but does that count? I went there when I was younger with my family. Um, but yeah, I think, obviously I'm going to be traveling soon throughout Africa. That is my first stop. And I know that, in traveling internationally, that does open up your experience. I've heard stories, I've kind of lived vicariously through other people who have traveled to all over the world, right? And I've heard, obviously different perspectives. Some people say that when you leave the U.S., you go other places, you miss the U.S., you miss the luxuries, the conveniences that the U.S. has to offer. And then when you step back, like, you are so much more grateful for the things that we have here compared to other places, because they just don't have it. And a lot of times the things that attract us to traveling internationally is being able to be exposed to other cultures. But I feel like, you got that here. Maybe I would go to say every culture and country is represented here in New York City. So it's just like you've already had that exposure, you know? So it's like, what am I missing by not having traveled? But I am definitely going to travel to Africa and venture out through different countries in Africa very soon. But will I move to Africa? That's a huge jump. I've seen people who have moved, and it's just like, mixed stories, but majority have returned, right? Back to America, right? There's this, return back to Africa movement, and that's good and all, but a lot of those people who have been on that movement to return back to Africa have returned their ass back to America because they're just like, nah. It's like, you're moving from a well-developed country to an underdeveloped country, where there's not consistent clean running water, not consistent electricity or Wi-Fi, these things that we take for granted, that like really have become necessities. Right now, there was a point where we lived without Wi-Fi, we lived without the internet. For me, I don't know if that was such a time, because I think that when I was first exposed to the internet, I think I was in elementary school, right? So one can say I've pretty much always had access to the internet. But yeah, it's just like, you don't have those luxuries in other places. And so it makes you wonder, and especially if you are a business owner where, your business is primarily built on using the internet, then what are you going to do? Right? And then you run into the unforeseen political challenges of being in these countries, and you're like, I didn't anticipate that. It's just a lot of shit that people who are very ambitious and hopeful and optimistic, about leaving America and going to these countries throughout Africa, obviously to get more in tune with their roots, their heritage, their history. You are faced with very harsh realities of what's happening on the political landscape of that country, and just like, are you equipped? That then becomes a question. Like, are you equipped to deal with those challenges, right? Like, realistically. So it makes sense why a lot of people stay here, like myself, have not left the U.S. It's just like, shit, I think that's a luxury of being born in a country, as great as the U.S., and seeing that you really had no reason to leave. Like, I have no reason to really leave now that I couldn't afford it. I just don't have a reason necessarily. I had no reason to leave. But yeah, I'm definitely going to leave. I want to see what the hype is about, and I just for the experience, right, in traveling. But with that said, I'm going to end this video. You guys feel free to share your comments below. I mean, LA is always in the back of my mind because I've seen some very nice real estate there, like in the hills, like just imagining myself there. But I know I would probably be living there, or I'll always be in New York. I always find myself back here because this is where it's really popping. Though I do see how they, are getting ready for the Pan African Film Festival, which that was my shit back then. It's annual film festival, and they have, obviously films represented from many different parts of Africa and the African diaspora there at that festival, and it's really nice. It's a really nice setup. They have it at the Baldwin Hills Crenshaw Mall, and this, I think it's the Cinemark Theater there, and I miss it. I actually was thinking about going. I think it's coming up in February. I was thinking about actually booking a flight, making reservations, and going out there to be a part of that, because it's one hell of an experience. Yeah, they got its little things going on, but the palm trees are nice and all that. And this is a little secret for those who have made it this far in the video. But I actually used to smoke. I stopped smoking marijuana back in 2018. Prior to that, I had smoked since I was like 16 years old. And moving to LA, I moved to LA in 2016. I believe that is the same exact year they made recreational marijuana legal. To possess it, to sell it, to smoke it, it became legal, right? To do that with recreational marijuana without having to have a medical thing. I remember, though, when I got there, it wasn't quite legalized yet. They were in the process of legalizing it. So I ended up getting like the medical marijuana card and all of that. And, girl smoked out. Girl got some of the finest fucking marijuana there, So one can say that's a perk, but I'm done with that. We're in 2023. I have not touched marijuana since 2018. I've smelled it, obviously it's been in the air, but I haven't really had any cravings, any urges, for that. Just, I think I'm past that part of my life. But LA, it's fun in its own way. I like the mystique of LA. I like that there are a lot of hidden things, like the dark side. I kind of like the dark side of Hollywood, right? And the shit that goes down that, I was exposed to, but really not deeply immersed in, because I stepped away. I'm like, it kind of scared me a little bit. I'm like, hell nah, you turn. You turn, I ain't ready yet. This ain't me. But part of me kind of, has been curious, like, what is that like to go to those freaking underground parties, Illuminati? On that number in this video, I'm gonna catch you guys in the next one. Actually, I'm gonna come back because I am going to unveil the 45th edition of the Ubawa magazine that came out in January. So I actually gonna bring that back to you guys later in my next video. So stay tuned. Catch you guys in the next one. But New York it is, baby. I ain't going nowhere. This is